What is the weirdest thing you had to do at someone else's house because of their culture, religion?
I worked for a rental car company in an Orthodox Jewish community. A customer rushed in on a Friday evening and asked to be driven home immediately because if we didn't make it to his house by sundown he would have to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way due to the Sabbath. He used an app on his phone to tell him the exact time of sundown each day. I didn't have a driver available, so I just told him to go home and I'll come by his house later to grab the car. A half hour later I arrive at his house. Husband is nowhere to be found, and the following scenario ensues with his wife. My husband left the keys on our bedside table and I'm not allowed to touch them. Can you come in and grab them please? I awkwardly follow her into her bedroom and grab them from the bedside table. Can I ask one more favor? Do you mind unplugging the house for me? I then follow her into her basement and enter a room where there are literally 15 to 20 different electrical cords coming through holes into the walls and ceiling, and through a tangled series of different outlet strips are all consolidated into one master plug going into a standard wall outlet. She points at it and asks me to unplug it. I do. She thanks me. I leave. I had a lot of wild experiences in 5 years working that job. This one was definitely top 5.
Went to a friend's house for dinner, a lovely meal. The whole family cleaned their plates of food, then turned them over and ate dessert on the back of their plates like it was the most normal thing in the world. I copied them just to be polite.
This might be my favorite one here. The mental image of a family flipping their plates over to eat dessert is absolutely hilarious.
We got yelled at for playing that devil game again. We were playing Mario Kart, and Bowser kept freaking his mum out. So we muted it and all was fine from then on. Meanwhile his little brother was literally playing Diablo 2 at the time in the same room. But he already had it muted, so it wasn't a problem, I guess.
I had a good friend whose family were wealthy and very big on some weird sort of gift giving. Basically there were 2 things. 1. You could not give them a present. No gifts at birthdays, Christmas, etc. If you gave them a gift they would either politely refuse or donate it. 2. You always received a gift if you went to their house, even if it was for an afternoon. I remember going to my friend's house when I was 8 or 9, 1998-1999, and them giving me a PlayStation, and each time I went over they'd give me a new game, which continued until they gave me a Nintendo GameCube. Very weird, and it wasn't because I was poor, we lived in the same area etc. This recently repeated itself when I visited my friend's house, now lives with his own family, and when I was leaving his wife was trying to give me a bottle of scotch and my daughter a effing Nintendo Switch. Edit. They were Middle Eastern, not really sure what religion. His dad was a property developer and investor. This was in Australia, Sydney. It just felt awkward after a while. Edit 2. Told my mate about this and he answers some of the questions for you all. 1. His family are part of the House of Saad but are not in the part that has any power or line of success unless like the other 10,000 people die. His last name isn't Saad, so this was news to me, but he made it clear it means nothing unless you are part of the inner circle. 2. The gift-giving thing is part of their family custom and they did not expect you to refuse. 3. They didn't accept gifts because they just purchased anything they wanted and they made their children do chores to earn items, so they had an appreciation for money. 4. The gifts, while expensive for most, didn't really register, as spending a few $100 wouldn't make a dent. They also regifted tons of poo. He said they probably had like 30 PlayStations in their cupboard. 5. His family also didn't want kids to be jealous of their son, because being an Arab in Australia was already pretty poo. 6. He has a cupboard like his parents' house. He doesn't have gaming consoles normally, as when he gets those he normally sells them, because hey, why not? 7. He isn't accepting applications for new friends.
Let me be his friend too.
It's a bit like this, but after a while it becomes weird.
I guess this qualifies as culture. My sister was dating a man that had been raised in a nudist colony. He took her to meet his family at their house at the colony. She was a tad surprised when his mother immediately says, "There is a hook on the bathroom door for your clothes." My sister proceeds to spend the entire evening naked with his folks. Her BF had told her before they went that it would be her option, but I guess his parents didn't think so.
When I lived in Antwerp, Belgium, I once was stopped by an elderly woman on the street. She was asking for help inside her house. Guiding me through a house where the temperature was way too hot, she stopped at every radiator and asked me to turn them down. In the end we went to the kitchen, where some Jewish women and children were watching me silently while I was putting all the burning gas stoves on a low heat. Then she showed me out, thanked me and closed the door. In Antwerp there is a big community of Hasidic Jews. I can imagine this was during Sabbath.
Correct. They can't adjust fire on the Sabbath. So they asked a Gentile to do it for them. There are limitations on that as well.
I went over to a friend's house for a sleepover, and when I changed into my pajamas her mum started demanding I put something else on and throw my pajamas out. I was really confused. She was yelling about how my pajamas were sinful and bore signs of the devil. I ended up just calling my mum to take me home because I was so uncomfortable, but that woman just kept scolding us for allowing me to wear satanic symbols. The symbols on my pajamas? Peace signs. She said they were broken crosses, so clearly a sign of the devil.
I had a neighborhood friend that I played on the street with and at school sometimes. Her mom and dad always told me I wasn't allowed to be in the same room as my friend's older brothers because seeing young women was a sin for unmarried men. I was 10 at the most. The youngest of her older brothers was 16. When I was asked by my friend to sleep over for her birthday, I was told by her and her mother that I needed to remain in my friend's bedroom. Her mother would bring us food and drinks and take us to go to the bathroom whenever it was safe. I told my sister about it the next day and she told me I wasn't allowed to go near their house or my friend again. To this day I still don't know if it was actually due to culture, religion, or if maybe they just had a really effing weird family.
I don't know if this counts as someone's culture. But when I was a kid, I had a sleepover with a friend that always sleeps naked. And I decided to sleep naked with him. Lol. Nothing sexual, just thought it was weird.
I love how you thought it was weird but you also decided to take part in it.
Must have ice cream after dinner, even a spoonful was enough. My friend invited me for a sleepover and his dad took out a small bucket of ice cream. Turns out they have a separate freezer just for ice cream. Friend's mum didn't want any, so she just took a spoonful from her husband. His dad would offer me ice cream whenever he can. We went for a drive and his dad saw a Dairy Queen. We went there and spent an hour inside trying every kind of ice cream they had. His mum wasn't any different, but it was with making sure the meal was balanced. Doesn't matter if you ate a dozen fried chicken, but you better eat a lot of vegetables with it. I thought that they probably grew up poor and ice cream was a luxury his dad never had, and maybe his mum wasn't able to eat much. My paternal grandma was unwilling to let a guest go home without eating anything.
Reminds me of the story my mother told me about her tour to China. There was a vegetarian in her group who always made it very clear that she didn't want any meat in her food, and every time they did it anyway. It seems they grew up with a lot of starvation where meat was almost an unthinkable luxury. They thought she ordered food without meat because she couldn't afford it, so they always threw it in to be nice. She nearly actually starved because she found so little meatless food to eat.
Went to stay with distant relatives in Lithuania during winter. It's nothing for them to all get naked in the sauna and pat each other with birch branches, then run out and roll in the snow. After a while I just went F it and gave into my inhibitions, but at first it was a bit confronting being naked, exposed and vulnerable. On the flip side, their snow-chilled vodka was primo, which broke the ice so to speak. Would 100% do again.
I am from Finland and I have seen every member of my family naked. From grandpa to uncle and aunt. Strong sauna culture here, and I think it would be weird if someone had not seen them naked. Nowadays we go to the sauna by gender, but it is common to have mixed sauna as well.
I once went to have dinner with a girl from uni who came from a super nice but very religious family. Her dad turned out to be the pastor. Absolutely no problem being silent while they're praying before dinner. However, after dinner the whole family got their Bibles out, and asked me politely, which my favorite verse was so we could read it together.
Proverbs chapter 5 verse 19. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you at all times.
I am reminded of the story on Reddit where a girl went to her boyfriend's parents' house to meet them, and they had a ritual where they gather around a table and savagely consume an entire orange, skin and all. She didn't do it, and she upset the entire family. I think it's my favorite story from Reddit.
Link.
Late to the game, but here goes. I had a friend growing up whose parents didn't allow any snacks in the house. Every time he invited me over to spend the night, I was expected to bring boxes of snack food because it could be allowed if brought in by an outsider. And yes, his parents would partake too. So there was junior high school aged high-gestake bringing boxes of snacks for an entire family to have a cheat night, at my expense.
This sounds like the opposite of how it's supposed to work. One family doesn't have good snack food, so the kid hangs out with his friend who does.
Worked nights for a while. Rented a house in a suburban area with heavy Jewish population. One morning at 8 a.m. got a knock at the door. Got home from work at 4 a.m. So, I'm instantly annoyed. So annoyed that I answer the door in my boxes. 3 little kids all look up at me. I sighed heavily and used the door to cover my nearly naked body. They squeaked up, "Can you turn off our fire?" At first I thought to tell him to just call the police and then said, "Wait, do you mean your stove?" Was answered in the affirmative. I quickly got dressed, went over and knocked on the door. The wife of the house opened the door and quickly pulled me in by my shirt. I looked around quickly and there was very little furniture in the house. Their kitchen table was a folding table with plastic chair and a bunch of men around it talking about the Islamic Brotherhood. The wife asked me to press one button on her electric stove, did it, then was very briskly pushed out of the house. I understand their religious practices. Still weird. Promptly went back to bed.
Hey, congrats, you're a Shabbos goy. And #X200B. You know some people charge for that.
I remember going to my Swedish friend's house. And while we were playing in his room, his mum yelled that dinner was ready. And check this. He told me to wait in his room while they ate. That poo was effing wild.
I slept over at a friend's house. When we woke up, he said HES going downstairs for a few minutes. After about 15 minutes I go on the stairs to see WTF is happening and they're eating breakfast. They see me and tell me HES almost done and will be up there soon. I still think about that poo 25 years later.
When I was in primary school, I made a new friend from Hong Kong. One day she came over to my house for a play date, and when her parents came to pick her up in the evening, my parents invited them all to stay for dinner at ours. They were new immigrants to Australia and I guess my parents thought they might not have many friends or family here. Anyway, they politely declined and said they didn't want to impose. My parents insisted it was no imposition at all, but they again declined, saying they didn't want to be rude and intrude on our family. We were kind of taken aback, but just assumed maybe they had their own dinner waiting at home and were too polite to say, so we saw him off. My friend later explained that her parents thought my parents weren't being genuine, and were only asking out of politeness, and the fact that our parents didn't press the issue further was proof that we didn't really want them there. It's not weird, but I thought it was an interesting contrast even as a kid. In the West, when someone offers you hospitality, it's seen as a genuine and voluntary gesture, and it'd be rude to turn it down. Whereas in some cultures, the offer of hospitality is seen as a compulsory courtesy but not necessarily always genuinely meant, so it's impolite to accept it immediately. In the West it would be impolite to keep insisting after someone's already declined an offer, but in other cultures you're expected to press the issue a bit and keep insisting to give them a chance to accept if they want to without appearing rude.
There's a word for it in Farsi, tarov. When my parents immigrated to Australia and were invited to their first party at a white Aussie household, they kept refusing food and drinks thinking it would be offered a second and third time, but ended up going hungry all night and wondering why the hosts were so rude. They laugh about it now though.
My friend's father was a Geordie and his granddad was Scottish. Each Hogmanay it was my job to leave their house and re-enter bearing a gift of coal. This was my task as I was the only one there with dark hair. So that's a thing. Edit. Spelling of Hogmanay.
I was kicked out of an elementary school friend's birthday party because another friend and I played witches in her treehouse. She was Southern Baptist. There was a literal cauldron in her treehouse. I stand by my decision.
I got kicked out of a house once for saying, "What the heck?" They too were Southern Baptists.
When meeting my Finnish fiancé's family, I was invited to a sauna with her brother. No clothes allowed. 10 out of 10 would sweat with my boy again.
I'm a Finn. On my travels in the US, our sauna culture came up when someone asked about it. I told that I had gone to sauna and skinny dipping with all my siblings. I had seen naked human bodies, both male and female, all my life. This was to a horror of the locals, who were quick to say they were sorry that I had been abused as a child. This got into a very curious conversation if non-sexual nudity is harming minors. I'm personally just fine with my body and never really had any of those OMG. I once saw a glimpse of my aunt's boob, moments I've heard in so many American stories.
I grew up in a highly Mormon area, so most of my friends in school were Mormon, and I was occasionally invited into their more intimate holiday celebrations. For example, one year, they gave me bags of food and drove me to a random house, then told me I had to go in and deliver the bags to the people inside, a big family who currently have no means of financial support, as a secret Santa. It was a wonderful gesture, but I felt really awkward being asked to do this in a stranger's house, but they asked me to do it for the expressed reason that I was a stranger, and they wouldn't know who had donated the food.
I've organized some secret Santa projects for families in need over the years, and I always hated delivering presents when the family was home. They were always grateful and kind, but it's really awkward and I don't really want to be thanked. It's like it cheapens the gesture. And I think it's better for the receivers to not have faces connected with the gifts. It was always better when just the mom was home or a friend let us in. It's better anonymous. In secondary school, my best friend's family were very devout Christians. For some reason, her mother would not let me use the toilet in their house. Their porcelain thrones were for Christian asses only. Hardly Christ-like if you ask me. When my friend moved away, we would write to each other, and her mother read all the letters. She told me I couldn't sign off my letters by saying things like, "Lots of love," or, "Love you loads," because it was lesbian. Okay, Susan, take a day off.
What a hateful woman.
She was unpleasant, for sure. She also wouldn't sit and eat with us, me, if I had dinner at their place. My friend's dad was super friendly, though.
I used to have a job that rented a lot of houses and properties in Southern California. Part of my job was meeting with property owners and to close a deal with them. One day I go to this man's house in Laguna Beach, as in his house was on the beach. I was meeting with an insanely wealthy but also insanely nice Asian man who I had met a couple of times before, and we had somewhat of a work-type relationship. As I begin to bring up the deal to be made, he suggests we walk to the beach first. I was ready to get home, it was Saturday, so we start walking, talking about life, etc. He then proceeded to hold my hand, interlocked finger style, for the whole walk. I was originally weirded out by it, but when I brought it up to a coworker, he said it's just a part of their culture. He also made me wear his personal house slippers to be allowed entry into his home. Just cultural differences, but it still cracks me up that the most romantic beach walk I've ever had in my life was with an 75-something man millionaire.
I remember seeing a picture of George W. Bush holding hands with Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah in 2005, just leisurely strolling through Bush's Texas ranch. I was so confused.
I grew up in the crazy religious house, and since Santa Claus was secular, he was completely removed from anything to do with our Christmas. Instead, we celebrated Christmas like an actual birthday party, complete with cake and singing Happy Birthday to Jesus. Edit. For all the people correctly describing Santa Claus as Saint Nick, religious figure. My family believed Catholics were going to hell because praying to saints is akin to praying to an idol or false god. Secular was probably the incorrect word, but they definitely saw Saint Nick and the Santa Claus character as a threat to real Christmas.
Who blew out the candles?
I was prohibited from going to the lobby of the house or get out of the room without giving a warning first, because I was prohibited to meet the wife of the host since I am a man. I was 10 years old, by the way.
I had to sit on furniture that was covered in plastic. My boyfriend, at the time, had a friend whose parents invited us all over to their house for a party. The mum was a clean freak or something because every piece of furniture was covered in plastic. It crinkled strangely when you sat on it. There were also plastic runners everywhere so the carpets wouldn't get dirty. We were all afraid to drop any food crumbs. It felt like we were in some kind of museum.
When I was a kid back in the 80s, all the old people had runners on the floor and plastic-covered furniture. My mom had new carpet installed and put down plastic protectors in front of the entryway. My brother and I used to love taking that thing, flipping it upside down so the spikes aimed up and putting it in front of a door we knew the other would be coming out of, like the bathroom door.
When the host has been saying grace for 5 straight minutes and we're all still holding hands in a big circle as if we're trying to summon a spirit, it feels pretty weird.
Drinking only milk for dinner. Don't get me wrong, I like milk and will freely drink it at times, but one time at my high school girlfriend's house I had dinner. I was helping set the table and her mom started to pour milk in all the glasses. Not wanting to be rude and ask for soda or something, I simply said, "I'll just have water." She replied with, "The Bible says milk is served with supper." No clue if this is a thing or not. It was the first and last time I've ever heard it, but the memory has stuck with me 20 plus years later. Edit 1. Sorry to all the people who got scammed thinking it was a story about drinking only milk without food. There was food. Don't remember what, but I see how the first line can seem otherwise. Edit 2. Thank you everyone mentioning, quoting the McPoyles. I've never heard of them and have only seen a few episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now I have something new to watch.
The Bible says yes because when the Bible was written the water would give you parasites.
I went over to my friend's house to play D&D in high school, and my friend's mum made lunch for the 7 of us. It was really good. We were just playing D&D and eating tacos, and after we all finished the lunch, everyone started pulling out cash. I was super confused. My friend turned to me and asked, "Do you have your $5? So apparently we were supposed to pay for the meal. I was incredibly embarrassed. One of my other friends ended up paying for me. I never played D&D at that house ever again. Edit, this happened in SoCal. They were just a standard American household as far as I was aware. The food was homemade. D&D is Dungeons & Dragons. It's a role-playing game. Also, I can confirm that my friend was not taking the money. I literally saw him give it to his mum.
Dunno what's weirder, the fact that they asked you to pay or the fact that the others were prepared.
I didn't personally experience this because I left the one time they tried to force me, but my friend's parents, mainly her super ultra Christian preacher stepfather, made her shower with a bathing suit on because he believed the only time you should be naked is when changing or to reproduce, when a man wants sex, otherwise you'll be too tempted by your own lust. And nakedness invites the devil in. This poor girl hadn't bathed naked in years and we were in middle school. She never smelled cause she would rub soap through the bathing suit, but she had yeast infections all the time if I remember right. I started inviting her to my house as often as I could just so she could properly shower. Unfortunately, her life hasn't been easy. We haven't spoken in years, but I think about her sometimes. Her parents were raising her to be the perfect Christian housewife. They monitored everything she did. She developed a horrible eating disorder because they told her no one would love her if she was even chubby and that she was letting the devil win if she ever indulged. She was expected to take care of the house, despite being the youngest child, as according to them God designed women to be housewives. They refused to let her attend sex ed and basically told her when the time comes her future husband's pleasure is the only thing that matters, that he will teach her what to do. They refused to even let her use tampons because they believe it would deflower her. She was always happy to be able to use them instead of bulky pads. I gave her the locker combo for my locker and showed her a little baggie of tampons she could get whenever she needed them. She was scared her controlling parents would check her locker and find them. They did regularly check it. Her mom was a coach at the school, so they stayed in mine. I ended up having to teach her sex ed and encouraged her to eat more. The encouragement didn't work that great, so instead I would bring her smoothies loaded with as many vitamins and calories that I could hide in it. I'm talking using heavy cream instead of milk type thing. She had it in her head that smoothies couldn't possibly have a lot of calories. I know it's not right to purposely deceive someone into eating something, but she was literally fainting from just walking because her body was so weak. I was a kid who didn't have any other resources to help. She did seem to get a little better once I started giving her the smoothies. She ended up lashing out at her parents, having risky sex, and ultimately ended up in a car wreck that caused pretty extensive brain damage. The wreck killed 2 other people. My old friend was still in high school and a teacher had been driving while texting on the way to school. Her seatbelt failed and she went through the windshield but somehow survived. She had a long road to recovery but has gained most function back from what I've heard. Her childhood was tragic and very damaging, but I love seeing the cute pictures of her with her girlfriend living far away from her awful family. We drifted apart when I moved away.
Not sit on the furniture because only the males were allowed to. kneel facing the wall while the 3 males in the house stood behind me and prayed in a cadence that got louder and louder until they were screaming about how to wear makeup is to create attraction is to create lust, and to create lust is to sin. I was 18 and wearing makeup. Legit, I thought I was about to be beheaded.
Makeup leads to attraction. Attraction leads to lust. Lust leads to sin. Sin leads to the dark side.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.